All right, everybody. So, good evening. Kind of some slides are a repeat of our budget when we first did the presentation for the preliminary budget, and objectives again are just to go through how we're funded.
1 second, I need to mute.
Of our budget. when we
Jackie, 1
first,
second, I need to mute.
did the presentation for the preliminary
I need
budget.
to mute.
And objectives again are just to go through how we're funded.
1 second, I need to mute.
Our budget.
Jackie,
Okay, are we
Go
good
ahead.
with YouTube? Okay.
Okay. Also, how we estimate and the time we spend on forecasting, and then how the revenue is spent based upon the needs of the school. Okay, next one. This is a recap of our March meeting and just the fiduciary responsibilities of the board, including financial oversight, and especially holding school staff accountable, providing current information on funding, and certainly making sure that every month we provide the ADA and weighted ADA numbers. Okay, next. Kind of a summary. Public districts are funded using local, state, and federal. This year, our budget is $17 million. So last year, about 16. 82% of our revenue is coming from state and local funding, which is an increase from our prior year. About 9% is coming this year from federal government, special ed, and about 7% for remaining ESSER. And the CSP is that charter school programs high school grant. Fundraising is about 3%, and this is a decrease over the last several years. So that's certainly a goal for us, for you all in terms of fundraising and revisiting foundations, because we've been extremely dependent on those additional funds, even looking forward to additional state funding. The remaining 1% is other sources like a rent and activities and Medicaid. And again, nothing new for since we've been doing budgets. About 2/3 of our budget, it goes to salary and benefits. Okay. Next is revenue. Next slide. So what we know is that pretty similar to 21-22, our basic formula, the hold harmless was removed. Prop C went up a little bit this year to a little over $1,200. We have an increase in federal ESSER funds in 22-23 because we're carrying over some of the funds that we could have used in prior year. And fully funded formula, but we also know that we are not getting the increase from the Fix the Glitch funding until 23-24. I keep getting emails and calls and questions because some people believe that is actually happening next year. With the most recent information I have, that is not correct. And again, that we've entered into an MOU with KCPS as we did last year. Unknown summer school attendance. It looks good right now. We've had pretty good attendance. We've had some COVID absences and even some more this week. So we'll probably reconvene our reopening committee and have a look at that. Re-enrollment, looking at this, our best estimate, we really looked at the numbers coming out of Tyler and only using those where everything was completed in this budget. Pre-K allocation, if you remember, we don't really know that until October, which is unusual, but we don't know it until October. So we went ahead and used 7 students for enrollment for pre-K, which are already filled. Hate to even say it, but any in-person disruptions or alternate methods of instruction still unknown. And then in transportation, we just finished some discussion about first student. We also, as a finance committee and admin, we're recommending the potential purchase of field trip buses if possible. And that costs of those are not included. Just to recap the American Rescue Plan, this was distributed to schools based on the Title I population. So many schools that have 1/3 of our population received almost 2 to 3 times more allocation. And Then in 2021, we had an allocation of 190 that's been spent and audited, and it was finished in a single audit. Our ESSER 2 allocation was 400, and we are carrying over 122,000 into our current budget year. And in ESSER 3, we allocated all of the $1 million to the 22-23 budget for maintaining current levels of staffing and programs. Part of that CARES Act was that you have to spend at least 20% of all those ESSER allocations on just student achievement. So we've certainly met that goal with the way we've used this money in the budget. Okay. Real quick, again, we had an allocation of 414,000, and we spent 292, so we're carrying over a little over 122,000, and then a little over $1 million in ESSER 3. We also got a teacher retention grant. The first year, I think it's 8,000, and the next year the total was 33,000 over the next couple of years, and that's for really teacher lounges, making sure there's snacks and coffee and anything that makes a teacher have a place to go. So with our allocations, that is how that grant was written. So we'll be working on some of that the rest of the summer. Okay. Just total revenue and expenses, as you can see, it's over $1.5 million increase in both revenue and expenses. And revenue over expenses is pretty similar. And then of course our debt service. So Harriet asked, we're at a break even. And again, we're at a break even budget at a little under $10,000. So that was our first goal. Okay, next. It's a breakdown of our sources of funding. And not a lot has changed. Gifts and grants is down a little bit. So I looked back several years ago, it was up 6 or 7%. So that's it's a decrease in gifts and grants, a little bit of increase in federal funding because of that ESSER money. So our goals, and certainly finding revenue in some of the other gifts and grants, foundations, and particular grants that might be targeted for academic support or transportation for at-risk students. So really maybe some targeted grants going forward. This is the last year of that School Smart expansion grant. Fundraising, I was just going to mention fundraising. We're just looking at pre-pandemic levels again, hoping to have in-person. And so that fundraising goal went back up a little bit, just assuming that we're going to get to pre-pandemic levels. In the next slide, just a reminder that our basic formula is state funding and local funding times our weighted average daily attendance, and then that equals what we get from our Missouri basic formula. And estimating the WADA is really important, and we spend a lot of time looking at that. Okay, next one, just really quick. What WADA means is we can get add-ons for free and reduced count, which we do not meet. IEP, which we might. We had our December count was higher, and so we won't know if we get any add-on for IEP this year, but we do assume that we will get an add-on of 3 students for LEP, and I think that represented 32 students, so we get credit for 3 that added to the weighted ADA. Okay. So our ADA, out of about 1,400 students that are enrolled, we're assuming our ADA is about 1,310. We're assuming we get credit for 101 summer school students and those 3 limited English proficiencies. So our WADA is 1,414 for next year. And at $9,000, which is what we used in this budget, per weighted ADA, it's $12,729,000, and our sponsor fees are deducted from that. So that's what you see on that budget. We don't have a line that shows the deduction on our budget, but when you see the $12,569,000, that's already had the sponsor fee applied. Just a little history. We, in this year's budget, it's 127 students. Over the previous years, and we're assuming the 4% attrition. We still applied that. We still applied a 95% average daily attendance, which we actually did. Summer school is pretty flat. Even though we had 800, I think at the end of the day, our budget had 820 enrolled and we used a 75%. We had like 870 students enrolled between the beginning and the end of some of the sessions. So still using that 75%. We played around with what the attendance was about a week ago and looked like that we were on track to get credit for the 101 students. So that's how we get to the 1,414 WADA. And some of that increase is high school, some of it's sixth grade, 20 students there, like an additional 30 students in high school, and then larger fifth grade going into sixth grade. And you know that we have not met our budget in terms of weighted ADA for the last couple of years. So the next year in 22-23, you can see that green line, the actual being right there or above this budget, hopefully. The revenues. So these are some of the assumptions that we've made. And I know when you look at your detailed budget with what, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of lines, there are tabs that support each one of these areas. Basic formula, we used $9,000. Prop C increased. And again, the Prop C that we get in 22-23 is that dollar times the weighted ADA of this ending school year of 21-22. So it's a year behind in terms of using the weighted ADA. And at the beginning, we had we're assuming our kindergarten enrollment was a little under projections, but we did put in the 200 into the budget because there are students coming off the list. Again, same 4% during the year attrition. And we updated this plan with the current school year data. So what's in Tyler with everybody's applications completed. Transportation, 1 year and 1 year only, it would be great if they would do this every year, is an increase, 75% increase based upon that formula. So using that formula on line 40, it came to about $280,000. And again, COVID relief funds of, over $1,140,000, which is really helpful to this school year's budget. We'll have a little bit of IDA and title carryover from this year into 22-23, which helps, and that is baked into those numbers. Summer school, 101 kids. We have about a little over $500,000 in grants, returning to pre-pandemic levels. We're hoping for fundraising and food service, and the seamless summer, which was a pandemic relief, ends June 30. So for those in summer school, they are, excuse me, hold on 1 second to turn this page. So the kids in summer school will be getting some information that the last 8 days of summer school, the seamless summer free meals ends, and we're asking for prepay for the rest of those meals. And then there'll be a lot of communication coming out for the school year, because we're going back to paying for school meals, which is really unfortunate because the participation was so much better, obviously, but students actually ate the meals and the participation was better. Okay. Expenditures. Of course, a salary scale this year. Salaries and benefits is an increase of a little over $1 million, which includes the raises plus new staff, right? So new growth that you had in the detail. We assume staff participation and interns is about 85%. That's been our history the last couple of years, so that's built in. And 70% of our revenue goes to salaries and benefits. And right now, benefits are averaging upwards of $19,000 an employee, and that includes taxes, the 12% that the school has to put in for retirement, and health benefits that are a little over $7,000 per employee, paid right now at 100%. In the detailed budget, you'll see that we assume about a 2% increase in almost every expense, and then it adds on the number of additional students. So there's two formulas going in there for regular expenses. Many of the high school expenses right now are allocated to CSP grant, but there are high school for music supplies and things like that as we grow that high school. ESSER funds, again, are really dedicated to paras and instructional wages. So we meet the guidelines and addressing learning loss. Teaching resources, we've tried to keep that to about $450 per teacher. And that's been our goal, and we're still putting that in there. We had budgeted 10 J1 visa interns, hoping to still get 4 more, but in this budget, just there's the 10. And again, if we find 4 more, we will certainly find room in that budget to add the fees to get those 4 additional interns. Special ed expenses, our special ed count has grown in December. The number of students that have been assessed gets sent to DESE, and that's the allocation for the next year. So it's kind of like Prop C, maybe 1 year behind. Our expenses for all of the staff is a little over almost $500,000, and our revenue for next year is 280-ish. So the 50% of our revenue goes to covering some of the expenses for all the SPED teachers. And I don't think that's atypical, and I think it's been common in our budget. Okay, next. So just to break down, not a lot of changes from many years, except for that expenditures and transportation. I think it was 6% in the previous budget. So assuming that really there's only 500 riders, and that we go with one of the scenarios that was presented. Care and upkeep of the building again, and of course there are no capital expenses built into this budget, and probably we want to do that in July. We've been quite extensively on some of those things, getting a really good recap and a good spreadsheet so that you can see where we're going to land with capital needs. And again, hoping to bake some of those into the refinance so that we're not using reserves. Okay. This next one is just a snapshot of our non-salary related expenses. It doesn't leave a whole lot in our expenses. So teaching resources about 3%, summer school, transportation went up a wee bit. Care and upkeep of the buildings 9%, and again, not including capital needs in the care and upkeep of the building. You know, it's interesting, transportation, we think we've been using about 1.1 million for transportation costs. It was about $2,400 per rider, which is an increase of $700 per rider from the previous year. In a detailed list of all of the revenue sources. And obviously, if you look at the increase in transportation, it's significant, because this year we got $37,000 of revenue for all the transportation, which was still close to $800,000. So next year that $280,000 is budgeted, and that would be a 1 year. And that $37,000 for this year is because they take your efficiency and all your miles from the previous year. So since we didn't have any, we barely had transportation except for summer school last year. So that's why that has come down so much. And grants and donations, I mentioned that we want to get that increased. And then if you come down to line 10, see that $1 million is a huge boost and helped us balance this budget for this year, that ESSER 3 funding. Teacher retention grant will show up again next year, and I think next year it'll be around $30,000. So it's not a lot, but it's great. We did put in some money for a Department of Health and Senior Services grant. One of our nurse, Kristen Carlson, had talked to them and written it. And there was a lot of money available, but the window of usage was only from September 1 to June. And the things you could use the money for were very limited. So we are hoping to at least get $30,000 of expenses that we used, that we had this year that we thought supplanted ESSER a little bit more restrictive. But we did put that in there and been working with them on that. Hopefully finalize that. I think that, and DESI, last year we had a larger carryover in basic formula. If you remember, because we made the audit, we had more students than we were getting paid for at the end of the year. We got a pickup there. We also got a pickup on Title I and SPED. This year our carryover is only going to be around $60,000. Okay, next is our expenditures. Again, I think we've talked about these salaries and benefits making up the largest portion, and how we allocate all of the other expenses. And in other expenses, there's so many things: our insurance and legal and overhead and some of those kinds of things that are in that, in interest of not making this 20 lines long. Each one of them was not a significant amount, so we put those together. Our interest on the loans is there. Federal grant expenses will probably change during your board reports depending on timing of high school grant. But this, in year 4 of that grant, that's how much was left. It'll probably be more, but it will break even because we only expend what's left in that federal grant. So total expenses, revenue over expenses is around 436 this year. Debt service gives us to a break even of 9,400. If you remember at our last board meeting, we talked about probably ending the year at a negative 305. I'm going to tell you, we have not finished closing the month, and we did get an allocation from the district that we just received this week. So we'll put all that in there, and by the next board meeting, hopefully have good news on that. So
But
what
you don't think that 305 is going to be, it's going to be less than 305?
I can't say. I don't know that. I think that I think there was some timing of some other bills, and we just finished May, of course, but just trying to get as much information as we can from June. I really don't know.
Okay.
I'm hoping it's not. I'm hoping it's not more. We just haven't finished that, and the allocation from the district. And one of the reasons I'm saying that is because I haven't looked at it in comparison to what we were expecting, because I'm afraid on one hand that the same thing's going to happen with our payment from DESI, in that the pie was split more because they had to use the highest of the last 3 years in the payment of all the charters that they were paying.
Okay.
And I wasn't able to look at it. Stephen and I looked at it. I wasn't able to tell whether that was a decrease from what we were anticipating or not.
Okay.
Didn't look like it at first glance, but I need to look at that, because the memo did say that the district used the pandemic provision. And so all of the rest of the monies that was to be distributed to charter schools was based upon the charter school's highest weighted ADA of the last 3 years. I'm hoping that didn't hurt us. So that's where we are, break even again. And then what happens, as you know, is that right now we just threw in a couple of things. So we have money sitting aside that is supposed to be used in a restricted grant for capital expenses and armor, right? But those were received in a prior year. If we expend them next year, what that does, since we're at a break-even budget, is that on the ASBR would look like we have a deficit budget for next year. The other thing is, if we just threw in our discussions at Finance Committee and other discussions, what if we purchased some buses for field trips and sports? That would happen in this year, but we would be using our line of credit, so it could result in, so next year, if we do all these capital projects, just explaining that it could result in a deficit budget on the ASBR. Is that the worst thing? No, it's the way it works. Yes. So let's say next week, if we got our $200,000 from a grant, but it didn't get deposited. It got deposited because they wanted it to be deposited in June, but all of our expenses are next year. We take a hit on the ASBR because they only count what's the revenue and expenditures for that particular year. So this is what we were looking at. If we did armor renovation, that's going to cost about 150,000 more than what we had in that grant. And we purchase some buses or we do other things. What happens is that comes out of our estimated operating cash on July 1. And I think in your detailed budget that showed that. So we'd still have restricted cash of over $3 million. It's just it just has to be spent in that year. This is why I think it's critical for us to get to get these capital projects outlined and maybe be able to do them in a refi, which then wouldn't result in that ASBR change. That makes sense. Okay. Next one just has a list of all of our outstanding loans and ending balances. As you can see, pretty much similar to last year by $10,000. Okay, next. This is the summary of beginning cash in 21-22, all the activity, the decreases. This includes this would include the estimation that we were going to be in the hole and ending operating cash of a little over $3.5 million. Next. Just some key takeaways. So summary budget was $9,000 per weighted ADA. Thank goodness. You know, we'd been flat at 8,500 until this year. 1.1 million in the ESSER, $1 million in grants. Our expenses, numerous expenses covered by grants and ESSER. Then a 5% teacher salary scale increase. We're looking at armor capital improvements, remaining grant and an additional $150,000 in order to renovate the science rooms and the safety and the water needs in some of those classrooms. Remember, defer to payment to endowment. We used to always have a 35,000. When we have a break-even budget, we are not putting more money into that endowment. And that transportation is about 7% of all our expenses, and that's not a huge increase from previous years. Do you have any questions? I can go back to any slides or any questions. Again, I think that one of the discussions that we've had internally with finance, with Stephen as a new director of finance, is to probably look at all the capital needs and maybe have to do a budget revision in order to do those so that we get those approved, and or working with Michael and Chad and CBKC on refinancing the loans and putting some of the larger capital needs into that loan, which I think would be beneficial in the long run for sure. Any questions at all? Okay. So I think in July, August, you probably will have a budget amendment. We typically don't do that. We should present the changes throughout the year with the finance committee projections, but probably if we are going to do some of these capital projects, we will need to do a budget amendment. Mr. Bang, anything that I've left out? Anything you want to
Just
point?
for clarification about the capital project is the renovation for the chemistry and physics room and the art rooms, because we are making a bigger art rooms, and also gaining a couple of other rooms by redesigning a couple of rooms, because we need it. In the long run, we'll need them. So that's what we're doing. Normally, I mean, we were planning to use the money we already raised, but I think that doing the rest of the renovation would be a smart way so that we're done with it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Some of those costs, once they're already drilling through the floor for plumbing, might as well do the 3 rooms that you need in a row, right? And that just really cuts down on the costs. Absolutely. And I think Mr. Bang has the actual scope of work now, a little I don't think they finalized all of the costs, but I think it's getting very close. So I think July, August would be a budget amendment approval.
Any other questions on the budget?
Next slide, though, I just want to go over, there's three things. So every 3 years, we're required to go out for an official RFP for food services, and that has to be approved by DESE. The whole process does all the way we write the RFP, the ads, we've done all that. And so the administration recommends, after all of that, looking at the 2 RFPs, the official RFPs, that we go with JoJo's. What's going to have to happen is DESE approves that before it gets signed. So they can take up to 2 weeks. Today was the deadline. Yesterday was the deadline to make the decision. Then DESE needs to look at the full RFP that was submitted, and then they'll give us an okay. But I think the board needs to approve that the administration recommends JoJo's as the food service provider for next year, but Beth can't sign it and doesn't become official until DESE approves that in about a week or 2. So, which doesn't affect summer school at this point. So we need a motion to follow the recommendation for JoJo's to be the food service provider for the 22-23 school year, pending approval of DESE.
This is Gwen. I want to make a motion that we approve the JoJo's food service once that has been approved by DESE.
There's a second.
Second, Michelle.
Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
So then at the end, Mr. Bang needs to talk about the stipends proposed, but the other thing is then that I had for motions that you all needed to do is transportation and then stipend changes. You know, Mr. Bang presented the stipends to you. Some of them are just extensions and a little additional to what's built into the current budget. I think that they probably need to be approved as presented, as recommended by Mr. Bang, and then the finance committee and Stephen go back and Mr. Bang go back to work on the budget to see the impact of some of those additions. So there's all of the categories are already in the budget. His recommendations on the stipend changes were additional dollars per stipend. Homework, academic support, curriculum work, those are already built into the budget, but not at the rate he recommended at this point.
And this is what was sent out by email on those stipend recommendations. Mr. Mbang, anything you would want to sort of go over or share more details about? Well, you're on mute.
Most of them, I mean, there's only a slight increase. So for instance, the grade level team leaders are those teachers who coordinate the grade level the whole year and attend the BLT, Building Leadership Team. So it used to be 1,400, it's 1,600. The teacher mentor, in fact, did not increase at all. In fact, it decreased by $200 because I'm calculating the payment by hours of $35 for the whole year. And the teacher teach teachers is when teachers plan something and deliver of 1 hour and a half of instruction is $80. It used to be $75. So we increased by 5% around that. So all the teacher substitute is when you do not have, let's say a teacher has an unplanned leave at 2 o'clock and has to leave the building and you don't have a substitute. Or a teacher is absent in the morning and you have no substitute. When you have absolutely no substitute, sometimes what we do is we divide the classrooms if you have 6 classrooms, you divide the classroom, every teacher gets four kids around that. And because of the hassle, we divided the cost of the substitute we were supposed to hire, because the $150 is the change in the substitute rate. Our substitute rate, we had to change it anyway from 130 to 150 the current year. So I'm updating what we were giving the teachers to 150 as opposed to 130 before. So we share, the teachers are sharing the cost of the substitute of the day. We should change, yeah. And for the after-school clubs, and there's 2 levels. The first level is supervision only, and other level is when you're planning and delivering something, teaching for $45 is when you're planning. And the Title I academic support, you see that because it involves a lot of planning and documentation required from the teacher to do it. So summer school, Saturday school was $35, moved to $40. In fact, I think it is a bit low because the teacher has to leave their house on a Saturday, drive, come, and supervise for 3 hours. So 3 hours. So fortunately, so far we don't have a lot of issues finding teachers to do that, to come and supervise things. It can, yeah. And we have at least a minimum of 2 teachers per session because we want to have at least a male and a female to be able to supervise kids, at least. So athletics, a change for the coach from 35 to 40, and the assistant coach did not change. And the last one is school committees and events. We added a extra school events. The reason is per our contract and school handbook, teachers are expected to attend some of the evenings, school events, like for instance, curriculum night, parent-teacher conferences, and so on that the teachers. Now, if we expect them to do any extra event like open house for admissions or science fairs, and any other extra night to pay them to do that, or meetings, Saturday meeting like the board strategic planning committee, strategic planning, paying teachers to attend, as opposed to just asking for volunteer. And the last one is a school leadership committees, is like a BLT, building leadership team, for a whole year, meets once every other week. If you are not a team leader, or other committees that like the school safety committee and well-being, we need teachers, committees that we need teachers to attend, and just give them a stipend to be part of it. That one did not change.
And I just appreciate sort of that we recognize teachers for their time, including when they have to substitute for missing teacher, right? Because I know that happened way too frequently, more than we would like, but that we recognize that is an extra duty they're taking on. So I appreciate that we do that for teachers. I think we need a motion to approve those stipends. Anybody?
Motion to approve the stipends.
And I second Jen.
Fabulous. Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. I don't think we have taken a motion to approve the budget yet.
Right.
We're talking about transportation.
Transportation.
Do we want to do transportation first? Okay, can I get a motion to approve first student option 1?
So moved.
I second it.
Any discussion?
I vote very hesitant. I understand you need to move the charts forward, but I'm very hesitant about this. That's my discussion.
Right. Any other discussion? Okay. Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay, motion carries. And budget. Can I get a motion to approve the budget?
Do you need to approve the principals one before the budgets? Because if you, no,
Oh,
don't need to.
That will probably just require that, we'll probably have to address that in the amendment, but it's just, in July, we'll see. Because I don't think that, I'd have to look. Did we put that in the second draft?
It's a minimal change on the budget.
Right, it would be.
We're talking
yes.
about five people.
Yeah.
2.5%.
I'm trying to see if we did that when we were playing with that last one.
So as you know, we already approved the increase of the salary of the teachers by 5%. And they more than deserve it. If you could do more, you do it. But I think also that our principals equally deserve that kind of raise. It's a crazy job, extremely stressful, and having to work with very limited means and so on. So, any questions or concern?
Not at all.
no. Did we decide we do need a motion, or that's just sort of, I don't think we do we?
Is it in the budget?
No, so that would have to be in a budget amendment in July, which is fine. It's easy to do. Like you said, it'd just be the 5 changes, but we can certainly do that, you know, after if it's approved, we'll just put that in and then
Yeah, the reason I'm putting, I don't want any auditors thinking that the head of school is giving raise like left and right without the board approval. So that's
right,
those are things that need to be careful about.
right. So once it's approved, then we would have to do an amendment in the budget in July or August before the September agreements come out.
So
So
what
we
would
do
be
approve it today, so it can be amended, okay.
So we do need a motion to approve 5% increase for principals.
Okay, so moved, Michelle.
Second, Mike.
Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Okay, anything else for our special meeting tonight?
2 things. Do we need to
Transportation.
pull the JoJo's RFP down off the website if that's, or not the JoJo's, the food service RFP down off the website?
Please, because it ended today. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Would have forgotten.
And secondly, the governor is expected to sign the House Bill 1552 this Wednesday between 12:30 and 2 at the signing ceremony. So,
Great. That's good.
Fabulous news. We need some good news around here. Too much bad news lately.
Really good.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for those updates.
All right.
So
Anything
we
else?
need to approve the budget.
Oh, I thought we did a motion. Did we not do the budget?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Did the principals, yeah.
Can I get a motion to approve the budget? That's an important one.
So moved.
Second, Mike.
Any discussion? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Oops.
And then the only other thing that I had, I know at our last meeting, we talked about moving forward, moving our regular meetings to Wednesday instead of Monday. July will stick to Monday, but starting in August, we'll update the calendar to reflect the second Wednesday of each month. So you will see that change come through.
Good move.
This is my last meeting. It's been a pleasure.
I think we could squeeze in one more. Maybe we
No,
should.
no, this is my last meeting. It's been a great pleasure. Beth, you still need to have a party and put all these board members together.
I absolutely will. And you'll be invited to all future parties.
Okay.
Thank you, Harriet. We appreciate your time and you will be sorely missed. You have wonderful questions always. And so we really appreciate just your detail and your passion for this work. So Thank
Yeah.
you.
And your commitment since the very beginning before any of the rest of us were around. Well, Jackie, you were around.
And I'm assuming here you're still, I've informed Stephen that you're still on the finance committee, so.
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome.
She can't get out of that one. She tried to. She tried to say she's not needed. I was like, oh, you're needed.
Yeah. Chad needs to stay. Michael, it's great.
Once you get on the finance committee, you're never allowed off. All right.
There's so much fun.
And does everyone know that Mike's chairing the finance committee now with Harriet? But if not, now you do.
Yes.
Go, Mike.
Now
Those
you
are
need
hard
to do,
shoes to fill, but I'll do my best.
now you need to do all that stuff they wanted me to do, whatever that was on the, sheet and God knows what all on the computer. That I just haven't done.
You'll be getting an email from governance.
All right. Wonderful. Have a great evening, everybody. And Mr. Mbang, enjoy your travels.
Yes, do.
For
Yes.
sure.